Hello everyone, this is a short video for our class, Introduction to Ethics, Philosophy 2306 here at St. Philip's College during the fall 2018 semester. This is the online version of the class, and today, which is Tuesday the 30th of October, only one more day tomorrow of October, and then we're into November and the mad dash to the end. But it is Tuesday, it's the 30th. We did just have Professor Fuller's lecture on the history of vampire lore, which was hilarious and now turning into, I guess, just a Halloween tradition around here. He did it last year and it was loads of fun, so we got him to do it again. If you missed it, come next year. It's worth it. It's hilarious. Anyway, but what we're looking at in our class now is International Humanitarian Law. IHL. And IHL is the law of war. It's the rules that govern combat. And so I want to start with, in terms of an ethical perspective or an ethical take on this, lots of people just start with the very basic thing, which is, now hold on a minute, we're talking about war. That means all of us are trying to kill all of you. Does it even make sense to have rules or laws that somehow govern this? Because we're, trying to kill each other. Yeah, it turns out that what we have learned and what we have discovered through the history of doing this is that there are fundamental human values that transcend situations up to and including war. And so there are some basic rules that combatants agree to abide by, including some very basic things like you can't shoot civilians. You can't blow up hospitals. You have to treat prisoners of war fairly and equitably, and you have to make sure that they are free from harm and are fed and taken care of and have access to medical treatment. Now, that sounds kind of crazy to some people who haven't spent much time thinking about it, because they're like, wasn't I trying to kill that guy 5 minutes ago? And they're like, yes, when he was a combatant and a legal target under IHL. But as soon as somebody throws down their weapons and throws up their hands, and surrenders, once you've taken them as a prisoner, then they switch categories and they become a non-combatant. They might still be in the military, but now they are a non-combatant. They're no longer fighting. They're no longer a threat to you. And that means that they go into, it doesn't make them a civilian, because like I said, they're still in the military, but they're in the same bucket with other non-combatants, which includes things like, civilians. And also other recognized protected groups. They get this category. When they switch, they get these categorical protections. For example, other people in that same bucket are Red Cross volunteers, internationally recognized as neutral and just there to help the injured, the wounded, prisoners of war, civilians. That's their job. So it's, again, recognized that they're going to be non-combatants. So look, here's the thing about that. There's this huge difference between these two categories. We just saw some of this with Calvin Graham, our sailor. And one of the things that we had to think about was, okay, look, he's a child. He's only 12 years old when he signs up. And I want us to think about that issue. He lies to get in. So he does something wrong in order to get in and become a combatant. He signs up, he joins the Navy, he's in battle. Now, there's an interesting conflict right there, which is he's on a sailing ship, he's in uniform, he's fighting. Does that make him a legitimate target like all the other sailors on his ship? Well, the first answer to IHL there is yes, it does. But also, we have this rule. And one of the things I want us to look at and think about are child soldiers. And there's a treaty now that bans and prohibits children from signing up or from being drafted. And it makes sense for a lot of reasons. We don't want children fighting in combat. We don't want them in harm's way. And so we now have rules about this, IHL, rules about child soldiers. So that would make him not a legitimate target because he's a child. And child soldiers aren't soldiers, they're children. So children first, not soldiers. But now I know I can already hear it, well, what about children who are used as weapons of war against soldiers? I hear from veterans who say, well, there is some young person and they clearly look like they're under 18, but they're coming at us, firing at us. What do I do in that situation? Are they a direct threat to you? Yes. These are the principles that we want to think about and unpack in terms of the humanitarian values that underscore the rules and laws of war. Balance that against what are deemed to be legitimate and legal processes and policies surrounding warfare, like the targeting of combatants in declared war. And the United States, our country, conducts military operations around the world. We do so within the confines or within the restrictions of IHL because we have agreed to it. We've signed things like the Geneva Conventions, which are examples of IHL. It's not the only ones. There's lots of different treaties that make up the whole body, which is IHL. The Geneva Conventions are one set of treaties, international multilateral treaties that make this up. And so we agree to be bound by these restrictions. We do this in part because we say it reflects our values. We do it in part because we think it protects our own military. Believe me, that's how lots of these things got started, which is if you're worried about your people being captured and taken as prisoners and how they're going to be treated, the best thing you can do to ensure their good treatment is to treat prisoners that you take on the battlefield well. So there's this kind of tension between both sides. You start treating them bad, there's nothing to prevent them from treating your own people that have been captured badly. So part of this was about mutual interest, but it's also about, like I said, declared, stated values of the society. And once we are bound to these things, it becomes law. So we're also legally obligated to follow things. So we follow these rules because it's the law, because it reflects our values, because we think it's in our own best interest. Those things line up. They're not, mutually exclusive. They're actually in alignment, which is why we follow the rules of IHL. Now I'm going to get into more about what are some of the details, but the one I want you to start thinking about, because we've already been thinking about it, is child soldiers. What do you think should be that minimum age? Just so you know, right now in the United States, we say it's 18 to volunteer or to be drafted. There's an exception, which is 17 with parental permission or court order. So it turns out that 18 is the rule, but there's an exception for 17 under certain circumstances. It wasn't that way, by the way, during the Second World War. We just watched this thing about Calvin Graham. Then it was 17 with an exception for 16, but you had to have parental permission and all the rest for 16. Obviously, 12 years old didn't fit the bill. But there are literally tens and tens of thousands of child soldiers around the world in combat right now. And we've got to think about that. Do we want to support international efforts to ban child soldiers and to reach treaties and to reach agreements and to put pressure and to fight the use of children as soldiers in combat situations? And if we do, what's the best way to accomplish that goal? If we don't, why not? By the way, when I teach this class, I inevitably have somebody go, wait a minute, what's the rule now? And I say, well, it's 1817, but that's the United States policy. When you look at the rules, the world is trying to get agreement around 18 and above, classifying 17-year-olds as child soldiers. So not having no exception for that, whether parental permission or not. The United States has fought that, doesn't want that. It wants to maintain the legal right to both accept volunteers with parental permission at 17 and also to draft 17-year-olds. The people trying to get consensus around the treaty banning child soldiers are trying to fight that and get everybody on board at 18. So look, I'll talk some more about child soldiers and about how that fits into a larger picture of IHL tomorrow. But think about your own sense of where do you think the line should be and why. Think about Calvin Graham, but also think about what's that based upon? Is it a rule? Is it a value? Is it your judgment? Is it reason? Think about that. And we'll talk some more again soon. In the meantime, take care, and I'll see you again soon. All right, bye-bye.